and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome all of you for Hindu News Analysis session with us today. And before we begin by having a look at today's chief news clippings, a quick gentle reminder. In case you are looking for expert help for your upcoming UPSC CSE exam, now look no further. Because now is the time you can fill up the Google form that has been provided in the description box of this video. How will it help you? Because if we have your details, we will get in touch with you to organize a one-on-one counseling session only for you. So now let's come to today's agenda and have a look at all the news clippings that we have selected for you from today's The Hindu Newspaper, the New Delhi edition. Let's first have a look at the topics to be covered from the perspective of UPSC Mains exam that demand a detailed analysis. Now, the first headline here talks about NCTE. It talks about teachers' education. Now, we might wonder sometimes that what has the government been doing really in the field of promoting education in India? As the fastest growing economies of the world, we still spend less than 5 to 6% of our GDP on education. And hence comes a new initiative by the Indian government to promote quality education. Let's break down this article and understand in detail various aspects of National Mission for Mentoring. That's page number 14. Very critical for GS paper 2. The next article for UPSC Mains is Myanmar. The ongoing civil problems in Myanmar, ethnic violence, political unrest in a country that is not ready to settle. What ramifications does it have for India as one of an important neighbor of Myanmar? Does it pose internal security challenges for our country? That's something we will address in the article on Myanmar from page number 9. And the last article for detailed analysis here talks about, once again, an issue integral to IR. This is India-France Strategic Partnership. We will understand a brief historical background of the Indo-France relations, and then we shall come back and analyze the contemporary developments. Because recently, on the occasion of the Republic Day, French representation was the talk of the town. So what does it mean for the evolving bilateral ties? Let's talk about that from page number 8. And then for prelims, we have a set of 3 factual articles. The first one here from page number 12 talks about how the Supreme Court feels that not enough is being done to coordinate and consolidate environmental protection in India. So we shall talk about the Forest Amendment Act 2023. With this, the 5th article is an intrigue. It is one of the most shocking, surprising developments in the field of artificial intelligence and its applications on human health. We talk about a new project, Neuralink. And the last article here, page number 15, The Hindu, talks about how economic growth is often impacted deeply by the performance of core sectors of the economy. On this note, now let's quickly analyze the first important articles of today, and this has been taken from page number 14 for you, pertinent to GS paper 2 social justice. What does the article talk about? Now this article says NCTE is waiting for the approval by Ministry of Education. For what? To launch on a very big scale, pan-India scale, a new mission known as National Mission for Mentoring. Although talks for introducing a mission that could help in mentoring teaching professionals in India has been in vogue since 2022. The government had in fact initiated a small component of the National Mission for Mentoring back in September 2022 and some of it in 2023 itself on pilot basis. But a pan-India mission implementation is what now we are talking about. So what is NCTE? Why is the government focusing on National Mission for Mentoring? What significance does it have and how can it change the face of Indian education system? Now, before we proceed by breaking down the article step by step, it's important to know the background in which this article has been picked up. Talking about India's education system, as I said, less than 5% of GDP has been spent annually on fostering primary, secondary, higher technical education in India. Now, this could mean a massive skill gap. The skill gap here is the gap between the increasing demographic dividend of India. We know that India is right now one of the youngest countries of the world. The average age of Indian citizen is about 27 years, which is very young as compared to other aging societies of the world. Now, a society in which most people are above 60 are referred to as silver economies. These have their own challenges because they lack human capacity, they lack human potential, they lack human capital, human resources, which could be utilized for economic development. But India, luckily, as per the United Nations Development Program, until 2027, in fact, until 2040, this is going to be a period of nearly 15 years in which India will also change slowly but eventually. Today, we enjoy a nice demographic dividend, which means that Indian population right now is very young. Most Indians are between 15 to 49 years of age, an age where they can contribute in the workforce of the economy. And that's why Indian human capital is an asset. The reason why most Indians are employed in the Middle Eastern, West Asian, construction sector. The reason why in Canada, majority Indians are employed in various manufacturing service sectors. The reason why Silicon Valley is made up of majority of Indians. The reason is a rich human capital that we have the capacity to provide in a world which is now lacking human capital. The reason why countries like Canada, Japan, South Korea and Russia, they actually invite expats so that they can come and enable contribution in the workforce. In this regard, is having a demographic dividend enough? Is having a young population more than sufficient? Not really. Because while India has a massive demographic dividend, the problem is of skill gap. We have not invested enough to build up on this young population's potential. The rising rates of unemployment, the massive number of people in multidimensional poverty could be some evidences of how we still lack the potential to tap on this demographic dividend. Now, in this light, back in 2020, the government of India introduced a revolutionary policy for education referred to as the National Education Policy 2020. Why was it different? Because before this, just twice we had taken some initiative towards making education policies. One happened in 1968, the other in 86. After this, the first revolutionary step came as NEP 2020. And why was it so different from the previous policies? Is because for the first time, the Indian government showed its intention for building human capital on a massive scale. How? By giving a very strong push towards digital education. You might have heard about the National Digital University that's being set up in India under the recommendation of NEP 2020. So not only did the NEP focus majorly upon building a strong digital education based on ICT technology, smart classrooms, it also tried to cover the gaps that happen because of language diversity in India. It said that now all students should be encouraged to take up education in their mother tongue until 5th standard. In fact, up till 8th grade, children can continue receiving education in their mother tongue. Again, a revolutionary step to bridge the regional divide into India. More than this, the policy did many other revolutionary initiatives such as making preschool compulsory. So a 3 years Anganwadi education or primary education became absolutely compulsory for all children under the age of 5. Besides that, there were many more initiatives taken, such as introducing vocational skills at a large scale. Because we know that today we talk about the Skill India Mission, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and this is possible only when we use the potential that we have in the domain of vocational skills. In fact, if you remember, there was another Yojana that was introduced by the Honorable Prime Minister last year that focused exclusively upon developing vocational skill potential in India by training artisans and local handicraft makers. Right? So, in this regard, the NEP was indeed a revolution. But now, coming back to the agenda of this article, how this article becomes relevant to a recommendation made by NEP is that it was the same NEP which also said that we must improve our teachers' quality. Now, it was found after research that in most of the government schools, the teachers were not even spending 10 hours a week on education. In fact, they were doing secondary activities like census data collection or midday meal scheme or something associated with that. The true productivity was not found. Apart from that, teachers' qualification to be able to teach was again under question, whether they have digital skills, whether they have a degree from recognized institute. Those were things that became some grey areas. And that's why the NEP said something revolutionary, that not only do we need to teach our students and train them, we need to train our teachers, and hence today we talk about this national mission for mentoring. Because under this mission, the government is now thinking of providing a solid training to the teachers of schools, colleges and higher education institutes. Therefore, NCTE, or the National Council for Teacher Education, a statutory organization of India, has now decided that it will expand its workforce from 60 merely to about over 1,000 people. What's the purpose? The purpose is that once it is given the green signal by the Ministry of Education, it will immediately start implementing the NMM on a pan-Indian scale. What will be the benefit of NMM? The biggest benefit will be that already teachers across India, they find so much potential in this program that we have 700 teachers who've already signed up for the plan, even before the mission is rolled out officially. So now, from 2022 onwards, the government has constantly been thinking that let's create a workforce of talented people. Now, most of these people are Padma Shri awardees. They are people who have an excellence. They have an excellent performance in various fields, from fine arts to academic fields to sports to all these areas. Now, all these people will come and they shall contribute. In what? In skilling our teachers. They will provide mentoring to school teachers so that in turn they can go back and promote quality education for all. So that's the intention behind the national skill mission that we are talking about for teachers. And once again, it was an agenda of NEP 2020. Ultimately, the target is to create an education system in which we talk about a sound education foundation. We talk about the reality that teachers cannot presume that they know the curriculum perfectly, because even when they know the curriculum, according to the National Education Policy 2020, most of these teachers lack communication skills. Most of them lack an understanding of varied needs among students. So here, we are trying to also promote customized education. Teachers will not only be trained in academic skills, but also they shall be trained in pedagogy skills. Pedagogy is a bigger word than teaching. It means the art of delivering a lesson to a student. That skill has to be worked upon, because today we realize we are living in a dynamic social economic reality. We know that not only has artificial intelligence, not only has machine learning changed the way education used to perceive and grow. Even the teachers, they need to have these skills so that from the very beginning, smart learning can be introduced, right from the middle school onwards. Now, with this regards, the NMM, the National Mission of Mentoring, has identified certain key areas on which the teachers should be trained. These areas are, the first thing will be digital education. So, a computerized ICT mediated learning is critical here. Also, another very interesting aspect is social emotional learning. Now, you might have often heard that today we talk about accepting neurodiverse conditions. This is a word that's becoming very, very common in education industry right now. Neurodiversity. Even in corporate offices, we talk about neurodiversity nowadays. What is neurodiversity? Today, people realize that medical research says not everybody has the capacity to learn in the same fashion. People do have different and varying understanding levels, IQ levels and needs. So some people who were earlier treated as disabled or who were earlier treated as people who needed special learning, special education, today they are also accepted as part of normal learners, ordinary learners, because we believe that various kind of psychological and neurotic conditions can be considered as neurodiversity. We must encompass and accept this neurodiversity, and to promote this from the childhood level, to stop stigma against different abilities, to stop the stigma against special needs, the teachers will also be taught on empathy, how to empathize with students who have special needs, maybe students suffering from autism spectrum disorder, which contains many range of disorders that disable a child from learning in a way that's expected in ordinary schools. But today the teachers will be taught how to relate with those students on an emotive basis so that they can communicate with them better. The second important area under the NMM seems to be inclusive education. Let's include all the students. Let nobody remain unskilled, because we know that lack of skill at the school level translates into a poor technical higher education, and something eventually that will go on contributing to India's vulnerable unemployment, as we discussed yesterday. So to promote better skill learning at the school level, we talk about inclusive learning, also special teaching methods for students with neurodiverse conditions and special needs. Apart from that, ethics in teaching are very important. Now, it's not uncommon that every day we see in the newspapers that in some school or the other in India, references were made to the caste of student, to the gender of student, to the language, region, economic status of the student. And these are certain things that we talk about when we say ethics in education are very important. So the teachers will be taught about better ethical conduct of treating students with dignity. That's a very fundamental part here. Apart from that, classroom management. Classroom management to make sure that learning is inclusive, to make sure that it's customized for every child, to make sure that digital smart classrooms become an agenda in every school. Apart from that, we talk about developing skills which are also in terms of research project and art integrated pedagogy, which means we can use something which is referred to as visual stimulation in education. Now, this concept today in India is very misunderstood. It's majorly used in Montessori education, but at a level of higher education, primary, secondary, higher school, it's not used. So by visual stimulation, which means academic content could be enriched by data, graph, visual arts, once again, to retain students more. And at the end of the day, it also talks about focusing on schemes like midday meal scheme. In India, recently the controversy that happened in Karnataka, that the midday meal scheme was also caught up in a controversy between whether to provide protein-rich non-vegetarian meals or whether to stick to low-protein, high-carb vegetarian meals. So such controversies often reduce the performance of student, because ultimately the agenda of NEP is that without health outcomes, there can be no learning outcomes. So to promote that, we also here give a lot of impetus on not only midday meal scheme, but also breakfast to be included in the midday meal scheme. It was found in most districts of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu that after the midday meal scheme was implemented, the attendance in school shot up. Once again, it is very closely related to the idea of promoting health outcome for a better education. And at the end of the day, teachers' mental health engagement, because a teacher also needs to undergo some kind of a psychometric training here to be able to deal with complexities of students' life. So it's a very diverse program indeed when we talk about the NMM. Apart from that, the Ministry of Education has already handed over a lot of funds to the NCTE to implement this scheme. Say, for example, already rupees 1.28 crore to build a proper digital smart classroom infrastructure to further enhance the mission. Back in 2022-2023 itself, another 2 crore was spent to implement the mission on a pilot mode. And on that note, let's a quick factual understanding of the NCTE. As I said, it's a statutory body of the government which is responsible for training individuals, training teachers, so that they can take up teaching positions in primary, secondary and senior secondary schools. Whether we talk about the formal schooling or whether we talk about the online or correspondence schooling. So, to achieve a proper coordinated plan development of education student under the aegis of National Education Policy 2020, here we have the NCTE, who is constantly trying to implement strongly the idea of national mission on mentorship. So So that's what primarily the first article spoke about. Very important topic when it comes to improving educational outcomes in India, GS paper 2. And now once again, let's look at the other article which we need to break down in detail. The article has been taken from page number 9 for you, and it also pertains to IR. The article is integral to India's Look East policy. The article takes us down to the South Asian area because we are talking about Myanmar and what impact does it have on India's Look East policy, India's geopolitical interest. Now, let's see what really the article talks about. The article begins by saying or by lamenting that Myanmar is often referred to as the sick man of Southeast Asia, a very metaphoric way of saying that Myanmar has constantly been grappling with problems, civil problems, ethnic problems, and hence it is also one of the least livable countries across the globe. In fact, it ranks 0 when it comes to safety, security of expats and indigenous people. Why? Obviously, to understand the current situation, to understand why is this in the news, we need to slightly go back to historic context. Now, not just today, but ever since Burma was separated from the Indian region, from India. Since then, it was believed that the colonial policy of separating Burma has not done any justice to the people of this area. Why was it known as Burma? Because at the heart of all the problems that have happened in Myanmar since 1940 onwards are the diversity of ethnic groups in Myanmar or Burma. It is a country, it is a region which experiences huge diversity in ethnic communities. Now remember, ethnicity and race are not the same thing. A lot of people get confused. They say that when we talk about ethnicity, we are talking about race. Not really, because whenever you use the word race, you are talking about physical features only. But when you talk about ethnicity, you do talk about some physical similarities between people of same ethnicity. But apart from that, there are many commonalities such as language, sometimes even religion. So ethnicity is a much broader word if you compare it with race alone. Having said that, in Burma, in Myanmar, even today, the largest ethnic group is the Bamar group. No wonder. There has been constant battle between the ethnic majority and the small pockets of ethnic minorities that are spread all over the region, most of whom actually came from outside, from Bangladesh, some from the northeast part of India and associated territories. So today when we talk about the problem in Myanmar, we must understand that although from the beginning the area had been battling ethnic violence and ethnic atrocities against minorities, things actually started to get very disrupted, particularly after 2015. Because in 2011, the Myanmar's military junta, who rules Myanmar, it's an extremist group of Myanmar, the junta, that was dissolved. And elections were held, which means that for a short period of time after 2011, there was a scope of some peace in Myanmar. Not only did the civil conditions improve, but also foreign relations were soothing down. They were getting better. As a development of this back in 2015, one of the top pro-democracy, Nobel Prize winning leaders of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, a very common figure, she was released along with many other pro-democracy leaders from jail. Once they were released, things were looking stable and civil government was in power. But even during this time, complete peace did not happen, because if you remember, right from 2015 onwards until 2020, Myanmar was constantly coming under criticism from international community about how has it been treating its minorities. In 2020, things took a very ugly shape when a major segment of this ethnic community called Rohingya that came from the Rakhine region, they had to come out of the country. They had to experience a mass exodus. All these people experienced violence in the hands of Myanmar junta, and hence they had to leave Myanmar and go out to places like Bangladesh. Even India experienced a massive influx of the Rohingya refugees. They became refugees, and the problem is still ongoing. In fact, it's one of the major humanitarian crises in the East. From 2020 onwards, already the international community, including the International Court of Justice, was holding Myanmar for this crime. In fact, if you remember, even Aung San Suu Kyi, she had gone to the International Court of Justice to defend the actions of Myanmar junta that no, there has been no genocide against Rohingyas. But in reality, the public knew, the people knew that things here are not stable, they are not peaceful. Now, sadly, in 2020 when elections were held, once again people felt that now some peace might come. We might achieve some peace because Aung San Suu Kyi's party, it won a landslide victory by getting more than 80% of votes in the general election. This meant that for some time, a democratic party could form the government and things would stabilize. But that was a very short-lived happiness because in 2021, once again, the leader of Myanmar military is also referred to as the Tat Matau. This group launched a massive retaliation which is referred to as coup in political terms. The 2021 February coup was unexpected. It was just unauthorized. It came up suddenly. It blamed the government of Aung San Suu Kyi for having won the elections. It said that the election was manipulated, the results are corrupt, and they did not let them form the government. In fact, let alone forming the government, Aung San Suu Kyi, along with many other pro-democracy leaders from her party, were imprisoned. They were once again sent to jail. Their freedom was completely taken away. During this situation, when pro-democracy leaders were retained, they were jailed, a state of emergency was declared by the same military junta. This meant that now, once again, there is going to be no peace, and this is also a period of time from which the Indian and Myanmar dialogue broke down. Because as soon as the coup erupted in 2021, it became a massive problem for the neighbor countries of Myanmar. Why? Because during the coup, people said that, in fact, various ethnic communities of Myanmar complained that the military junta is not only harassing, it is extremely cruel, it is extremely dehumanizing in its treatment of the local people. Belts of ethnic communities were targeted, there were genocide, there were killings, there were rapes against women. Automatically, it meant moving out of the country. It meant, once again, people emigrating from Myanmar. Now, naturally, when people of this sensitive war zone territory, they emigrate, the biggest threat is experienced by countries like India, who happens to share a long land border with Myanmar. In fact, Myanmar is one of the only ASEAN countries with which India does share a long border. And hence, there was a constant infiltration of people, groups, communities, even extremist groups into Indian Northeast region. This meant ripple problems for India. Understand that already the northeastern part of India has not been a very stable region. Recently, we saw how in Manipur, the Kuki mighty ethnic conflicts broke out. Primarily, people think that it's an ethnic violence. It's also rooted, in fact, in communalism, because one of these communities is Christian, the other happens to be Hindu. So this communal ethnic violence has already been creating a lot of genocide in Manipur, and still the things are not stable, in fact. In this situation, we must remember that a lot of tribes living in Northeast India, particularly the Kuki, Meitei, Mizos of Mizoram, they also have ethnic linkages with a lot of tribals from Myanmar, Bangladesh. Remember the Kuki Chain area? That was in the news majorly last year. So what happens, a lot of people in Indian states like Mizoram, Manipur, not only did they experience a mass incoming of people from Myanmar, local groups started supporting the groups in Myanmar. While some ethnic communities were pro-democracy against the junta, some of them were retaliating against the junta right from India, while some of them were supporting the junta government also while in India, which meant insurgency constantly, violence constantly. It was against Indian sovereignty also. Particularly, countries of the East such as China, Laos, Thailand, Bangladesh, of course India. These are the countries who have constantly been impacted by this unrest of Myanmar. Now, another interesting thing is that a lot of people say that the conflict in Myanmar has major geopolitical ramifications on the global scale. Because a lot of junta leaders of Myanmar who have been committing these atrocities, they find support from secret support, tacit support from groups in China. Some of them also are operating while being situated in Thailand and China. And in fact, a lot of newspapers keep commenting that most of the leaders of junta, they take remote control of Myanmar. They sit back in Thailand and China with the groups that support them, and from there they sponsor all the events that are going on in Myanmar. So it also leads to further strain in the entire gamut of relations in this particular region. Now, in that light, when after 2021 coup, the Myanmar junta increased its atrocities on the people, it was the local ethnic communities of Myanmar. As I said, it is an ethnically diverse region. So the ethnic tribes, ethnic communities, they themselves become insurgents. They became rebels. Now the situation reminds us of the Sahel region of Africa, doesn't it? Even in the Sahel region of Africa, when local ethnic communities feel that the international community cannot do much to help them, what do? They take up arms in self-defense against jihadi groups, extremist groups. This is exactly what's been happening in Myanmar too. After 2021, the local ethnic communities, when they felt that they could do nothing much about the junta, the countries, or the other countries such as Japan or Vietnam or India, when they could not do much to impact the situation here, to help the people here, the local ethnic communities took up arms and rebelled against the junta. And how did that manifest? It manifested in the form of massive challenge that was posed to the military junta by the local groups. There were constant attacks, killings. It manifested majorly in 2023 October in the form of something that we call as Operation 1027. In this operation, it was a military operation in which an alliance which is referred to as Three Brotherhood Alliance, because it's a triad. It's a organization of three ethnic and armed groups of Myanmar. These three groups are the Arakan Army, the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, and the Tang National Liberation Army, the TNLA. They joined hands and they gave a massive ouster to the junta. To an extent that junta, the military junta, actually became helpless in the face of such a massive insurgency. And since then, the confusions, the fighting, and the civil war is on. The main problem is that, although it is causing a massive instability in the region, the international community has not been able to do much to help the situation in Myanmar. But the biggest worry is, what ramifications does it cause for India? Could it mean massive problems in India's foreign policy, in India's defense, internal security? For that, let's see, how does India get impacted? Obviously because we share a border. Obviously because India's northeast falls porous to the insurgency from Myanmar. There has been a massive influx of refugees from Myanmar, Bangladesh, into Mizoram and Manipur. Already the ethnic conflict at the domestic level is going on. This gets further fueled when the local people join hands with insurgents coming from Myanmar. That once again could pose a threat to India's sovereignty. It becomes an anti-India insurgency when people inside the border, they join hands with the nexus outside the border. This has completely destabilized the situation of security in Manipur, Mizoram, and other related areas. Plus the burden of refugees. Now we know that the United Nations World Status of Refugees report that came in 2021, it said that how India is one country which is constantly every year adding up to the burden of refugees from war-torn areas, whether it be Afghanistan after Taliban regime, or whether it be people coming from Sri Lanka, whether it be the Rohingya crisis, or now whether it be the ongoing Myanmar crisis. Apart from that, it also means that the free movement regime thought of between India and Myanmar will have to be reconsidered. Because today the government is into massively fencing its borders. Apart from that, communication becomes a key challenge here. So it is very difficult as a foreign policy decision that whether Indian diplomats should stay in touch with the pro-democracy leaders of Myanmar, who will promise a better tomorrow if they can come back to power, or should they negotiate with the junta groups, or should they negotiate with the civil groups. So that becomes a major problem, and that also breaks down communication with Myanmar. Although many development projects were initiated between the two countries, but as of now, things become cold when such outbreaks happen. Now, it, as I said, once again becomes a confusing decision whether India needs to negotiate with the NUG or whether India needs to actually first focus on the insurgency that's going on by trying to create a peace dialogue. Now, therefore, we need some strong initiatives by countries of the ASEAN and India, obviously, because we need to give this clear message that at least violence and insurgency is something that the government will not tolerate because it destabilizes local politics, domestic politics. Apart from that, as per this article, India should also think of creating a forum which is referred to as a peace conclave, in which all the members of ASEAN and Quad, the group between India, Australia, Japan and US, it should come together and force or create a kind of condition where the civil groups in Myanmar are ready to negotiate peace. Sometimes we can make trio groups, troika groups like Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, who can put international pressure on Myanmar Janta as well as the local insurgent groups to maintain a ceasefire. Now, recently China said that China has mediated a ceasefire with the insurgent groups of Myanmar. Initially, there was some peace, but once again, it's a very temporary band-aid solution. In the longer run, there could be a proper evaluation of the problems of Myanmar, and a blueprint could be created for a better future peace policy. Now, another good development that could tilt in the favor of countries like India is that in case pro-democracy freedom leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi, they come to the power, they manage to escape from this unjustified, unauthorized confinement that has been put in them, and a democracy can be restored. It will go a long run in boosting India's Look East policy. So this is practically what this article spoke about. On that note now, let's jump to page number 8, where we are discussing another critical international issue, but this is pertaining to Indo-France relationship. Now, as a small background, now we recently know that the Republic Day ceremony in India saw the French head of the state as a chief guest. This is just a symbol of the comradeship between the two countries. Now, initially, Joe Biden was the American head of the state, was supposed to be visiting India, but since he cancelled his Quad summit and the attendance of the Republic Day function, the agreement, the acceptance by the French head of the state talks volumes about the long historical bond that exists between India and France. Now, India-French partnership, initially which was focusing on government domains, commercial domains, today is multifaceted. Today it is a multi-dimensional relationship that we talk about. Why? Because whether it be the Rafale deal, whether it be space initiative, today the bilateral ties have expanded to talk about issues such as climate change, usages of artificial intelligence. Besides geopolitical problems like Russia-Ukraine problem or the Palestine conflict that's going on. Now, a brief historical background as per the article would tell that India and France back in 1998 itself had taken up many strategic partnerships, under which when India did its first nuclear tests, and this was also condemned by many countries, specifically the nuclear non-proliferation countries, the NPT countries. It was France who in fact supported India in the light of the fact that this was an urgent need of India for self-defense. So that was one of the first milestones of the strategic relationship. Then France was also one of the first countries which initiated a negotiation with India regarding its security compulsions, whether it be in the face of impasse between Pakistan and India, or the Sino threat in the northeastern region. So France was the first country, in fact, to talk about it, to understand that and support India's nuclear program. Apart from that, France also became one of the first 5 out of the permanent United Nations Security Council countries which openly, explicitly supported India's membership to the United Nations Security Council. Once again, that spoke volumes about the understanding and the bonhomie between the two nations. Then we can also talk about how France took up this pro-India stand in the face of the fact that India, right from 1990 onwards, was a major emerging economy in the entire Asia-Pacific region. And in this regard, there are many other developments that we might mention. Say, for example, back in 1960s itself, India and France had started doing space cooperation. And with the help of France, India did set up the facility at Sriharikota in Andhra Pradesh, which then became a background, which became a stage for many propulsions, for many missions that India has launched. So once again, France's contribution in India's space program is very, very helpful. It's like a very decisive role that French had played. Then apart from that, the ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, and the French Space Agency, they are also working on many joint missions. In fact, talking about Chandrayaan, many components came with the help of France. Many policies were framed with the help of negotiations with France. Similarly, Gaganyaan, when we talk about the mission Gaganyaan, there also the French contribution can be highlighted. That how, not only in the terms of exchange of critical material, but also know-how and techniques, there's a huge help that India has been getting from France. Besides that, the recent visit by the French head of the state also highlights how New Space India Limited, a government's company under the Department of Space, has been inking a deal with French satellite launch company Arianespace for collaborating on many upcoming future launches. So that's something we must remember. Now, talking about existing contemporary bilateral cooperation, India and France have taken a step ahead. Now they are talking about defense industrial roadmap. How? This aims at collaborating in the production of defense equipment. For example, in military hardware techniques, space cooperation techniques. So all this technique and all this hardware that will be developed jointly by the two countries, once again, a very critical aspect of bilateral relationship. Similarly, whether it be space or defense, as we spoke about, today, India, France are also talking about some other segments, such as intelligence sharing and cyber security. Now, these are the prominent issues of the day. Apart from that, artificial intelligence, the DICE functions and the usages of artificial intelligence, whether it be in the field of healthcare or defense or space operations. As an emerging sector, both of these have agreed to share intelligence in artificial intelligence and neural networks and machine learning. Once again, this will boost not only strategic ties, it will also help India, in fact, in evolving state-of-the-art technology in these industries. A joint statement was also issued which indicates a consensus of the two countries towards the ongoing Ukraine and Russia conflict. Apart from that, even the Gaza-Palestine issue. Now remember that France being a key member of the NATO, this also means that the negotiations that India and France had on Russia-Ukraine also has a major impact on Indo-US relationship. Now Indo-US, one of the largest trading partners as they are today. Also, this relates to Indo-US relation when French-India relations are being covered. On the defense side, 6 Scorpene submarines missiles were built from the help of France by India because the technology came from France. So again, this meant better self-defense for India. Even Indian Prime Minister Honorable Shri Modi had visited France last year, and again they had spoke about further acquiring 3 more Scorpene technique missiles from France, air independent propulsion, and 26 Rafale M aircrafts. So therefore, these negotiations are ongoing regarding acquiring of Scorpene missiles, air independent propulsion, Rafales, many more Rafales, and that would continue for this entire year until the end of 2024. Apart from that, India-France Defence Industrial Roadmap also fits in, it also gels with the idea of India's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, when India gets technology from France, it is helping India's domestic manufacturing in critical sectors such as defense, space technology, healthcare, and AI. So, which means that it is also promoting Made in India initiative. Apart from that, let's also talk about the exchange in the field of education and employment, workforce. Today, we see that there are many Indian students who are taking up higher technical education in France. They are doing research projects in France. In fact, back in 2021, the government inspired by United Kingdom, the Indian government motivated by an agenda of Europe referred to as the Ethna Swan. It's a very important women empowerment scheme. Ethna Swan was the European version of the scheme. Now, this inspired an initiative called Kiran in India. Under this, many Indian women who had to leave the workforce dropout women, could now take up scholarship and do research, continue their higher education in universities situated in Europe, and France being one of the very popular destinations there. So in human capital development also, France is playing a key partner of India today. Today, the target is 30,000 students who are doing research and higher education in France from India. It should be more than 30,000 by 2030 as per the current plan that's envisaged. Similarly, young professional scheme that was initiated by India. It aims at migration and mobility partnership agreement, so that easy migration and emigration between the two countries, India and France, when it comes to education and workforce. Also, let's remember that about 1,000 French companies operate in India presently. Most influential companies, some of these, and 150 Indian business houses are operating from France. So it shows that the partnership is way beyond strategic, way beyond just economic, but also it extends to human capital development, education, research, and better infrastructure development between both the countries. Now, with this, let's quickly come to a prelims news, and this has been taken up from page 12. It talks about ecology and biodiversity. This news says that recently the Supreme Court has expressed its discontentment, its dismay over the fact that India has too many statutory bodies which deal with climate change and forest protection. Whether you talk about a centralized organization like National Green Tribunal, or whether you talk about many other NGOs, government-financed NGOs, or other proper statutory bodies also, which are working to protect forest rights, which are working towards controlling emissions. But these are too many in number. Sometimes what happens, policies made by one are contradicting with the policies made by another. Besides, the policies look more or less a paperwork. How many of these are being implemented truly in order to help mitigate climate change and for better climate adaptation? In this regard, the Supreme Court has said that there was a decision which the Supreme Court had announced, in fact, back in 2023, and the decision was here, creating a centrally empowered committee. The centrally empowered committee would be created with the purpose of including certain top officials from government departments, including at the ministerial level. These people will together make policies with regards to forest, with regards to emissions, climate change, and these policies will have the final call. So therefore, the arbitrary policies that are being made right now will have to be consolidated and coordinated. For that, this is more or less a mission that creates one-point solution to all the climate problems. But the problem is that the centrally empowered committee also talks about the Forest Right Amendment Act of 2023. Now, in 2023, the government has announced the Forest Right Amendment Act, but this has been criticized by people across the country. Why? Because as per this Forest Amendment Act, the previous Forest Act of 1980 will now be revised. What revisions are being planned? One of the biggest revisions that the government is planning under this Amendment Act is that now many more zoos, sanctuaries, national parks will be set up in previously reserved forest areas. Another thing it says is that let's promote involvement of local communities, the local tribes, the local communities which are living in the peripheries or inside the forests. Let's promote their involvement by creating better infrastructure to promote ecotourism. So for construction infrastructure, employment will be generated to the local communities, which is a beneficial side of it, of course, to promote ecotourism. But where is the problem then? Why do so many departments, NGOs, civil society groups, suddenly they are up in the arms against this act? The biggest reason is that they feel it is very anti-democratic. They feel that by consolidating the policy making regarding forest rights only in the hands of central empowered committee, which is comprised of senior government officials and ministers, it will take away the participation of NGOs, civil society groups, common pro-environmentalists in participating and impacting policies towards climate change. That's the biggest criticism. They feel it is anti-democratic. Another criticism that the centrally empowered committee has been facing is that people say this is a concurrent subject topic, which means state and the central government both should have a right to make laws on this topic. But when the government says that now only union government will have an upper say, it again means that specific problems, specific ecological problems of states will not be understood. They will not be highlighted. Another major issue that is being spoken about here is that if the government is allowing too much infrastructural development like sanctuaries, national parks, zoo, research and development, R&D in a major way in the reserved forest areas, then will it actually not further alienate the local communities? Will it further not create environmental toxicity? Because whenever there is construction, it could be in the form of a wildlife corridor, it could be in the form of a national park. Whenever these things happen, they do have some or the other ramification for the ecology. So in a way, it's counterintuitive that in the process of preventing the environmental damage, we are in fact promoting concretization. So these are certain aspects highlighted by this article. And therefore, this panel which is being spoken about, which shall replace the previous ad hoc policies of the government in climate prevention and adaptation, is something that's yet to be seen how it unfolds. And on that note, let's come to the most interesting, probably, news piece of the day. This is page number 11, The Hindu. Very relevant for your GS Paper 3 Science and Technology. What does it talk about? Now, this talks about how Elon Musk, the man behind the company X, the man behind so many interesting space initiatives, has announced that his company called Neuralink has done something which previously people would never think about. What is this new development? This is the ultimate form in which AI can manifest itself today. This company, which is a computer brain interface company of Elon Musk called Neuralink, announced that it has fitted some computer components in human brain. Now, what's the benefit of that? The benefit is that it will help in providing motor skills, movement skills, communication skills to some people who are otherwise victims of spinal cord diseases, disorders which make them completely immobile. Very common diseases which lead to immobility among people sometimes could be the Gehrig's disease or the ALS as you call it, a kind of sclerosis where once you get this disease, your muscles stop responding to your brain, which means you are practically disabled from conducting any function on your own. So this is the idea behind this initiative of Neuralink, that what if the human body could act as a remote control? What if we fit tiny chips of computer which exactly mimic the neural circuit of how the human brain works? In that case, the biggest miracle that would happen is that people who right now have no treatment, who cannot move, probably will find some respite. They will be able to operate just like a computer does on the basis of manipulation of the circuits that are being put inside their brain. For this, the company has long been recruiting candidates who are victims of such diseases, candidates who are comfortable with this kind of a trial. So the Neuralink's device that is being spoken about right now, that is fitted in the brain, it's a very small gadget. It's like the size of a coin, and it is designed to be put inside the human skull. It has a very thin wiring component which will go inside the brain, and then what happens, these wires which are surgically placed inside, they will coordinate human movement. Initially, the goal was to create a brain cum computer so that people can live a more fulfilling, able life. Much later, it can have other consequences too. It could probably mean another leap in AI. Already, right now, we are focusing upon neural circuits. What are neural circuits? Neural circuits are designs in which computers will work like human neural system, just like the various neurons, just like the various neural circuits of the brain interact with each other to give a command to the body, just like they think and rationalize. Similarly, computers will take up this job. And then human stimulant robots will become a very near reality. So what the company says is that once this circuit is fixed inside the human brain, it is very easy by using a computer cursor or a keyword to give commands to it. In fact, the technology will be so sophisticated that once the circuit is inside, humans can themselves think. And just by thinking, they can operate their system. They can operate the computer that's installed in the brain. So it's a very sensitive technology indeed. And also, not just Neuralink, there are many other companies which are also trying to work on an agenda like this. The ultimate application is in the field of medical science. Now, already AI and neural circuit technology is working automated surgeries, the new CAR T therapy, the new cures for cancers, all of that. They already are finding help from AI. And today this is one of the most advanced leap that we've seen, that more than 40 computer brains, more than 40 such gadgets are already underway now. They might soon be rolled out, and let's see what revolution it does in the field of health and human body. On that note, let's skip to the last topic of the day. This is GS paper 3, page number 15, but taken from Economy. What does it talk about? It talks about a paradox. It says that recently, how the finance ministry said that India might be in the process of experiencing more than 7.5% GDP growth rate in the coming financial year 2025. Also, the same estimation was made by International Monetary Fund, which said that yes, indeed, Indian economy is leaping forward at a very impressive scale. In fact, shortly we might become the third largest economy of the globe. These are the theories that are being touted. A very promising growth in future. However, right now, we are concerned with the volatile, the fluctuations, the dip downs in core sector of our economy. What is the core sector of our economy? Now, in Indian economy, there are certain sectors. These sectors could be, say for example, cement, mineral oil, steel, and many other relevant such sectors. These are sectors which are the capital-based structures of our economy. These are the capital-based sectors. Why? Because on the one hand, these sectors, they provide raw material to other ancillary and manufacturing industries. On the other hand, they also impact supply chain. Yet another aspect of them is that they determine the performance of overall economy by in turn determining the performance of other sectors of the economy. So they will have a ripple effect. In case the growth output in these core sectors is high, which would mean an overall boosted economic growth. But what if it dips down? In case it dips down, we will see the ripple effects in the overall economy as well. So this is exactly what the article is talking about. It says the core sector output in India has suddenly gone to a 14-month low from December onwards. The first time that we are witnessing a very sharp dip. In this regard, we must also talk about the index of core industries. Now, index of core industries is a measurement. It is like a yardstick that measures the performance of all these, rather the output of all these core sectors in India. It makes a comprehensive list. And then there is a measurement that's made regarding the output of Indian core industries. Also remember that these core sectors have a very heavy weightage in the index of core industries, as we call it the ICI. In fact, more than 40% of the important core industries are weighed in this scale. So it definitely has a major ramification for the economy in general, because not only will it impact the policies of RBI, not only will it impact the policies of the central government, not only will it impact the manufacturing output of India overall, but these fluctuations also contribute a big deal in overall economic growth. So it's yet to be seen the performance of these sectors in the coming few months. Obviously now the budget is also being rolled out today, the interim budget. So that will also determine how the future economic growth is yet to be set. And on this note, let's quickly, before we end, so here is a list of all the core sectors that I was talking about, and the measurement index, it is trying to calculate the output of these index. Also, you can remember as a fact for the prelims that there is this aspirants formula that is being used by the ICI, this index, to measure the output of all these core sectors. And on that note, now let's quickly, before we end, analyze the mains practice questions that we have for you. The first question says examine, and when you examine something, the question tab examine, it means that you need to analyze the pros and the cons, the positive and the negative aspects of the question that is being asked, the topic that's being covered. So examine the various dimensions of India-France defense cooperation and evaluate its significance in the context of India's strategic interest and regional security dynamics. Discuss how this partnership can shape the future of India's defense capacities and its role in global geopolitics. It's a multifaceted question, but quite a direct question there, because as we just discussed, we can speak about the various sectors in which both these countries are having good bilateral bond. We could talk about defense, we could talk about education, workforce, exchange, immigration, emigration. We could talk about space technology, we could talk about AI, we could talk about how geopolitical interests are getting common. We could talk about India's association with the NATO countries. We could talk about how initially both these countries after the Cold War were displaying a very, very bipolar, a very, very multipolar interest rather than being unipolar per se. So all these can be covered as a historical context, and then we can talk about, of course, by highlighting examples such as the Scorpion missile or such as the space technology that India is borrowing, the France contribution in Gaganyaan and other such missions, the fact that they have decided to exchange technology, state-of-the-art technology and intelligence in many other fields like AI, consumer data. So all of that can be highlighted here. At the same time, we could also mention in one line, because we are talking about global geopolitics, that how in a situation of heated geopolitics, whether we talk about the Iran-Pakistan impasse, whether we talk about the India-China impasse, or whether we talk about the recent developments in the South China Sea area, all of these together, how they impact India's foreign policy. So what contribution can France do there? What capacity does India, what strength does India experience from this partnership is something we must talk about. On that note, the other question, again a 250 words question, it says examine the objectives and potential impact of national mission for mentoring. Very easy question, as proposed by the NCTE. In the context of national education policy, please discuss how this initiative could change the professional development of school teachers in India. A question that's quite expected in GS paper 2 this year. Because not only is NEP a very important topic for your essay paper and GS paper 2, it definitely will cover in the component of national mentoring mission. So in this question, once we understand and once we explain the NCTE, what role does it play, we can definitely talk about how the NCTE is encouraging the Union Education Ministry to promote NNM on a large-scale pan-India. The reason is, we just discussed in the PPT, all the objectives behind NMM, from empowering teachers to digital education to emotive learning, neurodiversity, all of that can be spoken about. We can make a mention of NEP by saying that it was a revolutionary education policy, one of its own kind after 1986, which says how should we expand digital learning. We could definitely mention the National Digital University that's underway, inspired by this initiative, the policy itself. We could talk about how we talk about improving teachers' capacity to teach, proper training, proper qualification, as well as digital mediated learning. So this is a quite direct question which you must attempt. And now with this, I take your leave. Thank you very much for being a part of this session. See you soon.